Hello there folks, my name is Spoonks, and as many of you are already aware, I recently saw the movie Abigail, and I did a full review on it, so if you want to see my full thoughts on the movie, go check out the review for yourself and then come back and watch this. But long story short, for those who don't want to watch the full review, I really enjoyed it, I loved it, I thought it was funny, really solid horror comedy, and I was curious to see what other people thought of it as well. And while I was satisfied to see that everyone else seemed to agree with me that it was a pretty solid horror movie, I noticed a very similar comparison with a large majority of people that they had with this movie, and that was the trailer revealed too much, and you're probably better off not watching any of the trailers, as the big reveal would leave a bigger impact had it not been revealed. And I both agree and disagree with this statement, as there are reasons why I think they should have kept it hidden and other reasons why I understand why they had to reveal the big reveal, that being that Abigail is a vampire. Now, from the moviegoer's perspective, I totally get why people feel this way. I felt the same way. From the trailers, it felt like the big reveal was going to happen maybe maybe a half an hour into the movie. But in actuality, the big reveal doesn't happen until like at least 35, maybe even 40 minutes into it, as that first chunk of the movie is all set up and build up for what's really going on, all this setup and secrecy behind what really is the matter of the situation and all this tension, but the audience already knows that this little girl is a vampire, so it doesn't really do a good job at that. And there was a simple solution to this, in regards to like the trailers and advertising, just don't reveal the fact that she's a vampire. You can still show the little girl being creepy and unsettling, show off the traps, maybe hint at to what's really going on with some of the characters getting killed off one by one, maybe even have the tagline be, "What's wrong with Abigail? Ooh." And then maybe at the end of the trailer, show her getting ready to attack the criminals, but then just end it right there. How effective that would have been. And I think that would have been a really solid, effective trailer that got more buzz. And when the big reveal happens in the movie, audiences will be like, "Oh my God, this is what the movie is about? That's crazy." Imagine the word of mouth on the movie then and there. So yes, I do understand from the moviegoer's perspective why that would have been preferable, and honestly, as I explained, there is a way to do this, and honestly probably would have benefited the movie more. It probably would have had an even better response from audiences. It would have even probably gotten the word out on to not really spoil the big reveal. Imagine what that would have done for the movie. But I also understand the studio and marketing side of this, because if you take out the fact that this little girl is a vampire, you just have another horror movie set in a haunted house with a creepy kid in it. And I think that, with the current state of movie going and how studios really want these movies to make as much money as quickly as possible, I feel like the studio was probably worried that while there would have been some buzz and interest had they kept the secret that Abigail is a vampire, they probably felt that a lot of the general public would just view this as just another horror movie with a creepy kid in it and not really go out and see it, and probably have deterred that film's opening weekend, which is why they probably leaned into the vampire aspect of the film heavily in the marketing. And this got me thinking on just how the current state on original movies is right now. As much as you see time and time again on the internet about people complaining, how come Hollywood keeps making all these franchise movies? We want original movies. The fact of the matter is, those original movies do not really bring the big bucks that the studios want them to. Why else do you think we keep getting Fast and Furious or Transformers movies? Because those movies keep bringing in the big bucks, and they're an easy sell to a lot of people than an original movie, which is why so many more of the mainstream movies are just big franchises, sequels, reboots, etc., etc. And because of that, it's an even tougher sell for original movies now, because the studios are struggling like, okay, this isn't based off of anything. This doesn't have like the Marvel logo on it. How do we sell this movie and get people interested? Which is why they have to really lean into showing a bit of the movie more than I think a lot of people would have preferred into the marketing than I think they would had this been a big franchise movie. And with the state of original movies now, especially with Universal, they don't have as much time to really find an audience now as in 2020 when COVID was a big problem for movies and studios. Universal shortened the theatrical window in a deal with a lot of the major theater chains, where if they had a movie that opened over $50 million, that movie would play in the theater for at least 30 days. If a movie made less than $50 million, the movie would only play in theaters for 17 days. Now, back then, this made a lot of sense. You know, a lot of people were still skeptical on going back to the movies, but they still wanted to go and watch all these movies. So movie theaters would get new movies and bring in people to the theater. But those who were skeptical and cautious for justified reasons didn't need to rush out to see these movies because they would be at home on demand for them in a short amount of time. But now that's pretty much the past. Now we're back in fruition pretty much. Everyone's going back to the movies with a lot of big movies now. So this method of release strategy isn't really effective anymore, as many of these original movies aren't going to really bring in those big numbers unless you have a really big hook or anything. You know, like Oppenheimer had the benefit that it was a Christopher Nolan movie, which is why it made so much on its first weekend. And that's another thing. These studios really want their opening weekends to be huge. They want to make all that money because that's where the headlines and the stories are now. You know, the trades and the news stories aren't going to write about how well Kung Fu Panda 4 did on its fifth weekend. If it did really well on its first weekend, that's the main story. That's what's going to be set in stone. Or had it done poorly, that's the main story that's going to be set in stone for that and many more. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's because many of these studios just really want that first weekend to do very well, and they want these movies to make as much money as they can quickly and as soon as possible, so they don't have to worry about it further down the road. But there is a catch here, and that is that things are definitely changing as a result of audience word of mouth. Now more than ever, it is absolutely crucial for a film to have solid or great word of mouth, because you can win your opening, but after that, your movie can plummet and be a big flop and disappointment. Most recent example of this is what happened with the new Ghostbusters movie. Yeah, it had a good opening weekend. It made a good chunk of its budget back, and it seemed like it was going to be one of the bigger, if not the biggest, Ghostbusters movie. But then once the word of mouth came out that the movie sucked, the film plummeted afterwards, and now it's the lowest grossing Ghostbusters film. Right now it's struggling to surpass Ghostbusters 2, where you look on the opposite side of the spectrum with like Pixar's Elemental. That film had a notoriously bad opening. It was Pixar's lowest opening since the first Toy Story. And then the word of mouth finally got out that the movie was actually a lot better than what the trailers had shown us, that the more people went to go and see it, and its legs grew because of it, and now it's one of the biggest surprises of last year. And there were other movies that followed in Elemental's footsteps too, you know, Anyone But You and Migration. Both of those movies had rough openings but then had strong legs. And there were other movies last year that followed in Ghostbusters' footsteps, you know, The Flash and Indiana Jones. They had good openings, maybe not good, but you know, they had good numbers, I guess, and then they really started to plummet afterwards once the word of mouth got really bad. So I really think that these studios need to have more faith in their audiences, and I think they really need to have less of a reliance on the opening weekend. We all know that that's the big seller for how a movie does. That's what most of the trades and stories are about, how a movie does on its first weekend. But I do think that they need to understand that it's also not the opening weekend that determines a movie's fate at the box office. It's what's after that, how a movie does for the rest of its run, that determines if it's a hit or not. Because, you know, once again, many of these movies aren't going to reach the heights of like a Super Mario Brothers or a Barbie, have these big opening weekends and really just take off after that, making billions of dollars. They're going to start small, but with good word of mouth and good audience feedback, they will, you know, potentially be able to grow. And this is definitely not going to happen with every single movie, but they got to have faith, because these are all a bunch of risks. The putting out an original idea, like I said, is a big risk now that you don't have a big name or a big franchise attached to it, but they're the ones who funded it, so they really need to put their effort and good faith into the audience to really decide that, and really try their best to really sell the movie on not just everything that the movie is about, but just the general premise, and get people excited and intrigued about it and really invested into what the movie is. So yeah, those are my 2 cents on what's happened with Abigail. I really went down a rabbit hole here, I know. I'm curious as to what the rest of your guys' thoughts are on what happened with Abigail, and what your thoughts are on just the state of movies and how original movies are being advertised to get people into the theaters, and just the current state of movie going overall. I'm curious to hear what more people have to say about this. Leave them in the comments below. If you like this video, hit the like button. If you like this channel, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on all the social media links right there. And until next time, everyone, stay sharp.